June 5th, 2006. It's the end of the semester. For most college students, that means one thing: going out, letting loose, drinking with friends, and making memories. That's exactly what Yuni was doing. She was a senior in the veterinary medicine program at Chunbuk National University in the southern city of Cheonju, South Korea. And she and her classmates had gathered at an off-campus restaurant in the Deokjin-dong neighborhood to celebrate finally wrapping up the semester. They sang, laughed, played games, and drank the night away. Back at the family home in Cheolwon, Gyeonggi Province, Yuni's father, Lee Dong-se, had already been planning for his daughter's future. He'd purchased over 10,000 square meters of land in Cheolwon because Yuni had talked about opening her own veterinary clinic after graduation. He had a vision of what life would look like: his family thriving, his daughters doing well and following their dreams. Then on June 8th, his phone rang. It was one of his daughter's friends. Yuni was missing, they said. He didn't know it yet, but that phone call signaled the beginning of a search that would consume the next 2 decades of his life. This is the story of Yuni. I don't actually play games that often because I am always so busy making videos for you guys, but every once in a while, when I finally get a little downtime, I will open something on my phone just to completely switch my brain off for a bit. Today, I thought I'd share something pretty fun, especially if you like dark fantasy style characters. This game that I'm playing these days is called Raid: Shadow Legends. Raid is one of those games I come back to because it's easy to pick up whenever I have time. I usually just log in, summon a few champions, upgrade them, maybe do a couple of battles, and somehow it turns into longer than I expected. And I do like that it actually feels kind of cinematic. The characters are really detailed, and some of them feel like they belong in dark fantasy stories. Right now, Raid features a unique lineup of legendary champions inspired by the classic tale, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, but with a much darker twist. There's Alice the Wanderer, Cheshire Cat, Mad Hatter, Knave of Hearts, and Queen of Hearts. Personally, I think Cheshire Cat is probably the creepiest one because he looks so unsettling in the best way possible. Alice the Wanderer is also really strong because she can control enemy skills while boosting her own damage output, so she is super versatile. So if you're already playing or you want to start, this is actually a really good time. When you download using my link or scan the QR code, you will unlock a free legendary champion, Narma the Returned, instantly. And once you reach level 15, you will also get an epic champion, Aina. On top of that, you can choose one of 5 promo codes for another legendary. Big Dog for Turvold, Get Alice for Alice, Kitty Cut for Cheshire Cat, Go Fast for Rosalvard, Wrath for Grand Oak Podrick. But make sure you download through my link or QR code within 48 hours, or you won't get these bonuses. If you do start playing, you can find me in-game under Dark Megan and feel free to join my clan, Dark Megan. Yeah, let me know if you already play. I'm actually curious how many of you are on Raid. Before we get to the details, we should learn a little more about Yuni. She grew up in a comfortable home in Gyeonggi Province. By all accounts, she was the kind of person you instinctively liked. Soft-spoken, kind, calm. The type of classmate your mother held up as an example when she wanted you to do better. And to top it all off, she was incredibly bright, consistently ranking among the top students in her class. She was studying veterinary medicine, but her path to veterinary school wasn't typical. She'd already spent 6 years studying statistics at Ewha Women's University, one of the most prestigious universities in Korea. Then at 25, she suddenly decided to start over. She packed up, moved south to Jeonju, and enrolled in a 4-year program at Jeonbuk National University. Ever the thoughtful daughter, she picked up part-time work to help pay for her own tuition and reduce the financial burden on her parents. Her coworkers loved her. She was simply one of those people who made friends everywhere she went. 4 days before Yuni disappeared, her bag was stolen. It was the night of June 2nd, 2006. She was walking home from her tutoring job when a man on a motorcycle rode past, snatched her bag, and took off. Her ID, her wallet, her phone, her planner, everything she'd normally have on her was gone in an instant. Then a van pulled up. 2 men inside saw what had just happened, and they took off after the motorcycle with Yuni in the passenger seat. After a short chase, they lost the thief when he zipped down a narrow alleyway. She was fortunate to have found help, but unfortunately, she never recovered her belongings. From June 2nd onward, she had no phone. The night of June 5th was the end of the semester party. Not knowing what lay ahead, everyone had a fun, relaxed time. They joyfully said their goodbyes as the event wrapped up at around 2:30 a.m. on June 6. A friend, named in some sources as Kim and others as Hwang, walked Yuni back to her apartment to make sure she got home safely. Kim, as we'll call him, was the last known person to see her alive. No one suspected that anything was wrong until June 7th, when Yuni didn't show up to class. And that wouldn't be too unusual for your average student, but not Yuni. It wasn't like her to be absent. At around lunchtime, Kim went to her apartment to check on her. The door was locked. He listened. A dog barked somewhere inside. He heard nothing else, and so he turned and left. Kim had Yuni's apartment's passcode. She'd given it to him months earlier so he could feed her dogs when she went home to visit her parents. He didn't open the door. It had only been 1 day. It was possible that Yuni was absent for one reason or another. The next day, there was still no sign of her. This time, some of Yuni's other friends accompanied Kim. Her apartment door was still locked, and it was still quiet inside. At this point, nobody was thinking of the worst-case scenario. They were just checking on a friend. But then one of them went and peered through the window. When they saw the inside of the apartment, they were shocked. The place was a wreck. Her things were scattered everywhere. Something wasn't right. Yuni was meticulous. Her room was always neat. Someone called her parents to ask if she'd gone home without telling anyone. But her family had no idea where she was either. That's when the worry turned into fear. While Yuni's family prepared to head down to Jeonju, her friends called the police. The police entered the apartment by breaking the lock. They found the apartment empty. Yuni wasn't there, and other than the mess, it was just her 2 dogs wandering around freely. The police didn't seem at all concerned. They told the friends she had probably just run off somewhere and instructed them to file a report at the local police station. Now, it's worth taking a moment here to mention that in Korea, adults who go missing are not technically classified as missing persons. They're classified as runaways. It carries more of an implication that their disappearance could be voluntary. As such, the police cannot begin tracking them unless they believe a crime has been committed, or the person missing has dementia or developmental disabilities. In Yuni's case, though the situation was suspicious, there wasn't any clear evidence of a crime. And so, Yuni's friends split into 2 groups. One group went to file the runaway report, and the others decided to clean the apartment before Yuni's parents arrived. They meant well. The dogs had made a mess, and the room was in disarray. It was just good manners to make the apartment look halfway presentable for when parents arrived. So they got to work, and in doing that, with the absolute best of intentions, they, and later Yuni's family, completely obliterated the crime scene. But what was at the scene before the cleanup? Someone had given Yuni fresh flowers shortly before she disappeared, and she'd put them on display. Now, this bouquet of fresh flowers was on the ground, dropped or knocked over. Some people following the case suggested this could have been evidence of an altercation. Others are more skeptical. There was a cigarette butt on the windowsill of the veranda. Yuni wasn't a regular smoker, but close friends said she'd smoked occasionally during stressful periods at Ewha University, and never fully kicked the habit. A cigarette butt is perfect for forensic investigations. It's been in someone's mouth, which means it's a good source of DNA. However, Yuni's sister found it, and worried about Uni getting in trouble for smoking, she threw it out. And then there was the most surprising discovery: several syringes of ketamine and another animal anesthetic. This would not be a normal discovery in any country, but it's hard to emphasize just how strange it is in Korea. The country's drug laws are incredibly strict, and recreational ketamine use in Korea is virtually unheard of today, let alone 20 years ago. Even inside hospitals, veterinary clinics, and research labs, every milliliter is logged. Removing a vial from a university lab requires specific authorization. So, how did several syringes of ketamine end up in a senior vet student's bedroom? And what was the intended purpose? We still don't know. That was what was there. But what was missing said just as much. Among the things that had disappeared from the apartment was a tea table and a hammer. The tea table was one Yuni was genuinely fond of, so much so that when one of its legs came loose, instead of tossing it, she had her friend, let's call this friend S, help fix it. On June 5th, the day of the party, Yuni had stopped by her apartment with S to grab something, and he saw the table sitting there. However, when Uni's friends entered the apartment on June 8th, the table was gone. Yuni's father eventually found it on June 13th, wedged in a narrow gap between discarded furniture on the street outside her building, with all 4 legs removed. Whoever took the legs off did a clean job, leaving no scratches, no marks, and no fingerprints or DNA anywhere on it. The hammer from her toolbox was gone too. It never turned up. Her shoes were also missing, and her dogs weren't locked up. When Yuni left the house, she always put her dogs in the utility room with their food and water. The fact that they were running loose around the apartment suggested she could have stepped outside momentarily, expecting to come right back. And then there was the computer. Between 2:59 and 3:02 a.m. on the night she disappeared, Uni conducted several searches on Naver, Korea's biggest search engine. She looked up the police emergency number, 112, and searched for information about sexual harassment, specifically whether someone following you and touching your behind counted as assault. And then, sometime later that night, somebody went back to the computer, searched for more information, and then manually deleted the browser history using an obscure piece of software that no ordinary user would know about. The machine was finally shut down at around 4:20 a.m. By June 10th, the police finally decided that Yuni's disappearance warranted a serious investigation. They interviewed her friends. They ran checks on people with criminal records in the area. They deployed roughly 15,000 personnel to search the surroundings of the university, the mountains, the internet cafes, the public bathhouses, the comic book cafes. 10 tips came in from the public. Every one of them led nowhere. That same day, there was activity on Yuni's music streaming account, and at around the same time, someone logged into her email from a hotel in Yeouido, in Seoul. The police pulled the hotel's CCTV footage, but they found nothing they could use. It was another dead end. Unfortunately, there were several things that hindered the investigation into Yuni's disappearance. The first failure was the initial police response. When officers arrived at the apartment on June 8th, they didn't seem concerned about the situation. They told the friends to file a runaway report, but made no attempt or suggestion to preserve the scene as it was. By the time the authorities had decided to take Yuni's case seriously, the crime scene had literally been wiped clean. The second failure was not fully looking into the bag theft. Yuni's phone had been stolen 4 days before she disappeared, along with her ID, her wallet, and her planner. Whoever ended up in possession of that bag gained access to her identity, her address, her contacts, her schedule, and her photo. The phone's last ping was on her own university campus. These facts should have been enough to make investigators look hard at whether the bag theft was random or whether it had been something to do with Yuni's disappearance. Unfortunately, this avenue of inquiry was not fully explored in 2006. And then there was the third oversight, and this is the one I find the most chilling. The veterinary medicine department at Chunbuk National University collected and incinerated animal remains on a weekly basis. The usual load was around 40 kilograms. However, in the week following Yuni's disappearance, the weight shot up to 110 kilograms. No one inspected the contents before they were cremated. Due to the extreme increase in weight, some people suspect that Yuni's body could have been hidden among the animal remains and incinerated before anyone thought to check. It's never been confirmed, but of course, it also cannot be ruled out. Nobody checked, and now, 20 years later, what evidence may have existed there is already long gone. There is one person in this case whose name keeps coming up as a suspect: Kim, the friend who walked Yuni home from the party. There are several small details that seem somewhat suspicious. On the night of the party, around 2:40 a.m., roughly the same time Kim would have been walking Yuni home, another classmate called him, but he didn't answer. Over the next 2 days, while Yuni was missing and not reachable, Kim was calling other classmates asking if anyone had heard from her. He showed up at her locked door on June 7th and yet didn't use the passcode she'd given him. He was also part of the cleanup group and, for some reason, decided to dispose of the trash 100 meters away, rather than leaving it in the trash disposal area in front of her apartment. But these aren't the only issues. It was widely known among their friend group that Kim had feelings for Yuni. A simple crush is totally normal. Except, this seemed different. Rumors circulated that he'd collected her hair and kept a journal logging her behaviors. This isn't a crush, that's an obsession. And yet, Yuni trusted him. His number was listed as her emergency contact. She'd given him her apartment passcode. People usually don't do those things for someone who makes them uneasy. The police formally questioned him, but couldn't find anything solid enough to charge him with. Eventually, they cleared him as a primary suspect. The popular Korean TV program, Unanswered Questions, conducted their own investigation into Yuni's case and came to the exact same conclusion. There just wasn't enough evidence to conclude he was guilty of anything. Years passed with no new information. The case went cold, but Yuni's parents refused to give up hope. They printed thousands of flyers and handed them out in Jeonju, in Seoul, in Namyangju. They started a YouTube channel called Find.Yuni. Friends and relatives helped, then inevitably drifted away. Her parents kept going. Years like that can hollow a person out. The pain, not just of losing someone you love dearly, but also having no idea what happened to them, leaves a person in a tragic state of purgatory. It's hard to move on when you have no answers and no closure at all. But for some people, it has a different effect. For those people, the lack of information lights a fire under them and pushes them to fight even harder for justice. This is what happened to Yuni's family. In 2020, 14 years after Yuni disappeared, the family hired a private forensics firm to re-examine her computer. The firm found something. Not only had search results from the night Yuni disappeared been deleted, there was more. Records from June 4th through June 8th, 2006, a window of time spanning from before she disappeared to the day she reported missing, had been deliberately deleted, wiped on purpose by someone who knew what they were doing. Lee Dong-se, Yuni's father, claimed the police had known this in 2006 and concealed it from the family. That single finding turned a grieving family into a fighting force. In 2024, the complaint started. The family filed against a cyber investigation officer for destruction of evidence, then against the former Jeonbuk police chief to dereliction of duty. On April 16, 2024, Yuni's father stood outside the provincial police agency and told reporters he didn't have much time left. A few months later, he published a book about the case, titled, "Do You Know Yuni?" Meanwhile, another suspect emerged, known only as A. He had attended Jeonbuk National University at the same time as Yuni in the same veterinary department. The Lee family has for years suspected him of being involved in her disappearance. In late 2024, the Lee family began installing life-size cardboard cutouts of Yuni around the city of Jeonju. There were 10 of them. Some went up in public squares, some went up at intersections, some went up specifically near A's workplace and along his daily route to work. He filed a complaint against the family under South Korea's Stalking Crime Act. And then on the evening of May 8th, 2025, at around 8:20 p.m., things escalated. This man, A, approached 2 of those cutouts on the road in the Hyojadong neighborhood, wearing a white surgical mask, blue surgical gloves, and carrying a box cutter. He cut the cable ties, holding the cutouts upright. He knocked cutouts over. He left. Then, 9 minutes later, he came back, crouched down, and destroyed the cutouts themselves. On August 18, 2025, the Jeonju Wansan police station announced that A had been charged with property damage. He admitted to what he did, saying the constant news coverage and public suspicion had taken a serious toll on him. Having those cutouts placed right outside his home and along his daily commute, forcing him to relive the accusations every single day, had pushed him to a breaking point. The case remains unsolved. The case file itself is reported to exceed 20,000 pages. The cold case team continues to review it, cross-referencing old details with the officers who first worked the investigation. Yuni's family has been using their pain to push for a legislative change, advocating for what they call the Adult Disappearance Act, or informally, the Yuni Act, to ensure that future disappearance cases are handled with more urgency than Yuni was. It is heartbreaking to know that had her disappearance been taken seriously from the start, the outcome could have been different. It's now been 20 years since Yuni's disappearance, and the land her father bought for her stands empty. He hasn't done anything with it. It's there waiting, just as he is, for her to return. Yuni's father is 90 now, and he is still standing on the side of the road in Jeonju. The official Find.Uni YouTube channel faithfully documents his activities. You can see him carefully preparing his picket sign before he heads out alone to continue to spread awareness about his daughter's case. He stands at a busy intersection with his sign and a cutout image of Yuni. Dozens of cars stream past him as he is left to breathe in the exhaust fumes. But he refuses to quit. He heads out knowing that each day could be his last, and still he is determined to use whatever time he has left to bring his daughter home. You can see his resolve as boldly as you can see the writing on his sign, which reads, "My daughter Yuni, even if your father becomes 90, even 100, I will find you without fail." we can only hope for the case to be solved before it's too late. That is all for today. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to use my link or scan the QR code to get your free bonuses when you start playing Raid.